There is an instruction in the Hebrew Bible so shocking that for centuries, readers have tried to explain it away. Some have argued it was just a vision. Others have said it was only a parable, a metaphor meant to make a theological point, because if it is real history, it makes us deeply uncomfortable. But the text does not read like a dream. It reads like a painful, personal reality. It names a real man, a real woman, and a real father-in-law. The book of Hosea opens with a prophet receiving his very first assignment from God. Usually, when God calls a prophet, the instruction is to go and speak, deliver a message, confront a king, call the people to repentance. But Hosea chapter 1, verse 2, begins with a completely different kind of command. God tells Hosea to go and take a wife of unfaithfulness and have children of unfaithfulness. The text gives the reason immediately. God says it is because the land commits great unfaithfulness by forsaking the Lord. Stop and feel the weight of that instruction. Hosea is a holy man. His life is entirely devoted to God. And God tells him to find a woman named Gomer and bind his life to hers. Not because she will be a faithful partner, not because she will be a steady companion, but precisely because she will break his heart. The text implies that her unfaithfulness was not a surprise. It was a guarantee. Hosea is stepping into a marriage knowing that the vows being made will not hold. He is fully aware that she will eventually look for love somewhere else. This breaks almost every category we have for how God operates. Why would a holy God command his servant to step into a marriage that is destined for devastation? Why would God ask someone to embrace guaranteed betrayal? Most people read the prophets as men who simply delivered sermons. They stood in the public square, shouted a warning, and went home. But sometimes, God did not just give a prophet a message to speak. He made the prophet's actual life become the message. The prophet had to live the sermon before he could preach it. In the 8th century before Christ, the northern kingdom of Israel was wealthy, powerful, and entirely corrupt. They were worshiping the gods of surrounding nations. They were mistreating the vulnerable. They had forgotten the God who brought them out of Egypt. And worst of all, they thought everything was fine. They continued to offer sacrifices, assuming God was satisfied with their religious routines. God needed to wake them up. Words were no longer enough. So he turned Hosea's own home into a living theater. He turned a tragic marriage into a mirror. Every time Hosea walked through the streets with Gomer, the people were supposed to look at them and see themselves. But God was not just trying to teach Israel a lesson. He was trying to make Hosea feel the exact agony that God himself was feeling. To understand why this strange, heartbreaking marriage was necessary, we have to understand how God views his relationship with his people. Most people think of the biblical relationship between God and humanity as a legal contract. They think of a judge and a defendant, or a boss and an employee. But to see what is really happening in Hosea, we have to go back in time. We have to go to a mountain in the desert, where a very different kind of agreement was made. Because what happens next in Hosea's life only makes sense if you understand how the Bible actually defines a covenant. When Israel stood at the base of Mount Sinai, fresh out of Egyptian slavery, God did not just offer them a list of rules. Most of us imagine the giving of the 10 Commandments like a judge handing down a verdict, or a boss giving a contract to a new set of employees. We think of terms, conditions, and legal liabilities. But the language of Exodus chapters 19 through 24 is not the language of a courtroom. It is the language of a wedding. God is not looking for a workforce. He is inviting a people into an exclusive, intimate relationship. The mountain is covered in smoke and fire, acting almost like a massive wedding canopy over the assembly. The terms of the covenant are not just laws, they are vows. And when Moses reads the book of the covenant to the people, they respond in one unified voice. They say, "All that the Lord has spoken, we will do." It is the biblical equivalent of saying, "I do." They even share a covenant meal on the mountain to seal the agreement. This detail is crucial, because if the covenant at Sinai was merely a legal contract, then breaking it would just be a civil violation. You pay a fine, you do your time, and you move on. But if the covenant is a marriage, then breaking it is not just breaking a rule. It is breaking a vow. It is breaking a heart. This changes how you read almost everything in the Old Testament. Throughout the historical books and the prophets, Israel constantly falls into idolatry. They build altars to Baal. They worship the fertility gods of the Canaanites. And we often read that as simply choosing the wrong religion from a list of ancient. But God does not describe it as choosing the wrong religion. He describes it as spiritual adultery. Every time the people of Israel bowed down to a foreign idol, they were walking out on their wedding vows. They were seeking provision, protection, and pleasure from another lover. And God does not react to this like a distant judge reading a ledger. He reacts like a betrayed husband. The prophets are filled with the language of divine jealousy. Not a petty, controlling human jealousy, but the fierce, protective, grieving jealousy of a lover who has been abandoned by the one he rescued. This is exactly the reality that Hosea is stepping into. When God tells him to marry a woman of unfaithfulness, Hosea is being drafted into a living play. He is being asked to take on the role of God, and Gomer, his bride, represents the nation of Israel. Every time Hosea looks at Gomer, he is supposed to see the people of God. Every time she lies to him, he is supposed to feel the sting of Israel's idolatry. Every time she leaves the house to find another lover, Hosea experiences the exact, piercing grief that God feels every single day. Hosea's life is no longer his own. It is a canvas for divine revelation. He has to endure the heartbreak so he can speak about it with absolute, shattering honesty. But the prophetic pattern does not stop with the wedding day. A marriage brings children, and soon, Hosea and Gomer have 3 children. But in this prophetic drama, Hosea is not allowed to simply be a normal father. Even the children are drafted into the message, and the names God chooses for them carry a devastating weight. The names are not just labels, they are a ticking clock. They signal that the covenant is unraveling, and they prepare us for the moment Gomer finally walks out the door, beginning a descent into a much darker reality. The wedding of Hosea and Gomer was only the beginning of the living sermon. In the ancient world, a marriage was immediately followed by the expectation of children. And soon, Gomer becomes pregnant. She gives birth to a son. But Hosea is not allowed to choose a name based on family tradition. God tells Hosea exactly what to name the boy. He says, "Call his name Jezreel." Jezreel was a real geographical location. It was a valley known for tremendous bloodshed in Israel's history. But the name itself means God scatters. Every time Hosea called his son in from the street, he was shouting a warning to the entire nation. God scatters. The judgment is coming. But there is a small detail in the text regarding this first child that is easy to miss. The text says that Gomer bore Hosea a son. The paternity is established. But then, Gomer becomes pregnant a second time. She gives birth to a daughter. This time, the text simply says she conceived and bore a daughter. It does not say she bore the child to Hosea. The shadow of unfaithfulness has entered the home, and the name God gives this second child carries a terrible weight. God says, "Call her Lo Ruhamah." In Hebrew, Lo means no, or not. The word Ruhamah comes from the root word for a mother's womb. It means a deep, tender, maternal compassion. So the name translates to no mercy or not pitied. Imagine the agony of a father looking at a little girl, a child who may not even be his own, and being commanded by God to call her no mercy. God is telling Israel that his patience has run out. The protective canopy of his compassion is being lifted. Then comes the third child. Another son is born, and the name God chooses for this boy is the most devastating of all. God says, "Call his name Lo-Ami, not my people." To a modern reader, that just sounds like a harsh name. But to an ancient Israelite, it was the sound of the universe collapsing. Hundreds of years earlier, when God brought Israel out of Egypt, he made a foundational promise. He told them, "I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God." That was the marriage vow of Mount Sinai, my people. But now, naming this third child, God takes the ancient vow and completely reverses it. He says, "Call him not my people, for you are not my people, and I am not your God." It is the theological equivalent of a divorce decree. The vows have been shattered. The covenant is broken. Hosea's family has become a living monument to a ruined marriage. Look at the progression of the 3 children. God scatters. No mercy. Not my people. It is the systematic dismantling of a relationship. Hosea is forced to live in the wreckage of a home destroyed by betrayal. He feels the suspicion. He feels the public shame. He looks at children who bear the names of his own heartbreak. And he does it all because God wants Israel to see the exact shape of their own spiritual treason. The names signal that the covenant is completely severed. But the tragedy does not stop with the children. A broken home is hard enough to endure, but what happens next moves the story into a public scandal. Gomer is not just restless. She is leaving. And soon, she walks out the door, abandoning Hosea entirely and beginning a descent into a much darker reality. The story of Hosea could have ended with the naming of the third child. The vows were broken, the trust was gone, and eventually, the inevitable happens. Gomer leaves. She walks out of Hosea's home and returns to a life of unfaithfulness. But to understand the depth of the biblical message, we have to ask why. Why does she leave a prophet of God to chase other lovers? Hosea chapter 2 gives us the tragic answer. The text records Gomer's mindset, which is the exact mindset of the nation of Israel. She says, "I will go after my lovers, who give me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, my oil and my drink." She does not leave just for romance. She leaves for provision. She believes that her survival, her wealth, and her security come from these other men. This is not just a detail about a broken marriage. This is the core of Israel's spiritual crisis. In the ancient Near East, the most prominent false god was Baal. Baal was worshipped as the storm god, the god of rain, crops, and fertility. When the people of Israel moved into the Promised Land, they learned the farming techniques of the Canaanites, and slowly, they began to adopt Canaanite worship. They started to believe that it was Baal who was making their crops grow. They believed Baal was providing the grain and the wine. Notice the profound heartbreak in God's response in Hosea chapter 2, verse 8. God says, "And she did not know that it was I who gave her the grain, the wine, and the oil, and who lavished on her silver and gold, which they used for Baal." Pause and feel the weight of that sentence. God is the one providing for his bride. He is giving her the very things she needs to survive. And she takes the gifts of God, walks into the temple of a false god, and says, "Thank you, Baal." This is the illusion of idolatry. We often think of idolatry as a primitive practice of bowing to carved statues. But in the Bible, idolatry is always about where you look for your ultimate security, provision, and identity. Israel thought they were being practical. They thought they were securing their economic future by worshiping the gods of the land. They thought they were finding freedom. But the biblical pattern shows us a terrifying reality. Idolatry always promises freedom, but it always delivers slavery. The things we worship instead of God will gladly take our sacrifices, but they will never protect us when the famine comes. This is exactly what happens to Gomer. The text describes a devastating descent. Her lovers do not stay. The provision dries up. The men who promised her everything abandon her when her beauty fades and her resources are gone. She is stripped bare. She finds herself completely destitute, far from the safety of Hosea's house, trapped in a life she cannot escape. The illusion has shattered. At this point in the story, the legal contract is over. Deuteronomy chapter 24 contains strict laws about unfaithfulness and the breaking of marriage vows. According to the law of Moses, Hosea has every right to walk away. In fact, the culture would expect him to walk away. Any ancient court would grant him a divorce. His friends would tell him he had done enough. He had suffered the humiliation. He had preached the living sermon. And now, it was time to move on. Gomer is gone. She has hit the absolute bottom. The marriage is legally and practically dead. But right here, at the lowest point of the narrative, the book of Hosea pivots. The prophet hears the voice of God again. And the instruction God gives him next defies all human logic, ignores all cultural expectations, and sets the stage for the most shocking display of grace in the entire Old Testament. The law of Moses was clear. If a spouse is unfaithful, the covenant is broken. Hosea had every right to close the door and never look back. And for a while, that is exactly what seemed to happen. Gomer was gone. The home was quiet. The tragedy was complete. But then, the word of the Lord comes to Hosea a second time. In chapter 3, verse 1, God gives a command that shatters every human category of justice and fairness. God says, "Go again. Love a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the children of Israel." Notice the exact phrasing. God does not just say, "Go find her." He says, "Go love her." He commands the affection, the pursuit, and the total restoration of the heart. So Hosea walks out of his door, goes down into the city, and begins to look for the wife who abandoned him. But he does not find her in a palace. He does not find her living a life of luxury with a wealthy lover. He finds her completely broken. The text does not give us all the historical details, but it gives us a clear economic transaction. Gomer is being sold. Whether for debt or sheer survival, she has ended up on the auction block. She is a slave. And Hosea, the betrayed husband, the holy prophet, walks up to the marketplace. He has to stand in public, surrounded by the stares and whispers of the town, and bid on his own wife. Hosea chapter 3, verse 2 records the exact price. Hosea says, "So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver, and a homer, and a lethech of barley." That detail is not just ancient accounting. It is a window into the depth of Gomer's ruin. In the book of Exodus, chapter 21, the standard price to compensate a master for a slave was 30 shekels of silver. Hosea pays 15 shekels. He only has half the cash. He has to make up the rest of the price in barley. And barley was not premium grain. It was often used as animal feed. It was the food of the absolute poorest in society. It is a picture of scraping desperation. Hosea empties his pockets and his pantry to buy back the woman who destroyed his family. Think about the profound humiliation of this moment. He is paying a slave master for a woman who already has his name. He is buying what is legally and rightfully his. But God did not ask Hosea to do this just to test his patience. He asked him to do this because Hosea was mapping the exact shape of divine redemption. This is what God does. Israel had sold herself into spiritual slavery. They had given themselves over to foreign gods and foreign empires, believing they were buying freedom. Instead, they were trapped on the auction block of the ancient world. And God does not stand on a balcony in heaven and say, "You chose this, now live with it." He steps down into the dirt of the marketplace. He pays the price. He redeems the unfaithful bride. Hosea handing over the silver and the barley is a breathtaking foreshadowing of a God who buys back his people at a staggering cost. Hosea takes Gomer by the hand. He leads her away from the crowds and the shame. But what happens next is surprising. He does not immediately throw a celebration or pretend nothing happened. True restoration requires a process. To heal the deep wound of betrayal, God says he is going to take his bride back to a very specific and very difficult kind of place. Hosea has just paid the price. The silver and the barley have changed hands. Gomer is free from the auction block, but she is not yet fully healed. Most of us expect the story to immediately cut to a happy ending. We want them to walk back into their house, sit down at the dinner table, and resume a normal life. But true restoration does not work like that. You cannot simply erase years of betrayal with a single transaction. The debt was paid, but the heart still needed to be won back. And this is where the prophet gives us one of the most beautiful and surprising images in the entire Bible. In Hosea chapter 2, verse 14, God describes exactly what he is going to do with his unfaithful bride. He does not say he is going to drag her back to the capital city and put her on public display. He does not say he is going to lock her in a room so she can never leave again. God says, "Therefore, behold, I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her." Notice the location, the wilderness. In modern minds, the wilderness is usually a place of punishment. It is a place of barrenness, isolation, and exile. But in the biblical imagination, the wilderness means something very different. The wilderness is the place where Israel first fell in love with God. It was in the wilderness, after the exodus from Egypt, that God provided manna every morning. It was in the wilderness that the pillar of fire guided them through the dark. The wilderness was the place where there were no distractions, no false gods, and no other lovers to rely on. God is telling Israel that he is taking them back to the beginning. He has to pull them out of the wealthy, corrupt cities where Baal worship is woven into the economy. He has to take away the noise, the comfort, and the illusions. Not to punish them, but to speak tenderly to them. The Hebrew phrase used here literally means to speak directly to the heart. It is the language of a bridegroom wooing his bride all over again. And then, God makes a stunning promise. In verse 15, he says he will give her vineyards and make the valley of Achor a door of hope. To an ancient Israelite, the valley of Achor was not just a spot on a map. The word Achor means trouble, or disaster. Historically, it was the exact valley where the nation of Israel experienced total disaster and judgment. When they first entered the Promised Land, as recorded in the Book of Joshua, it was a place of shame, a monument to failure. But God says He is going to take the very place of their deepest shame, their most catastrophic failure, and turn it into a door of hope. This is the divine pattern of redemption. God does not ignore the past. He redeems it. He takes the exact location of the ruin and transforms it into the threshold of a new beginning. Hosea and Gomer are living this out. She is stepping out of the slave market, out of her shame, and back into a renewed covenant. But how can Hosea do this? How can any human being endure this level of betrayal, pay this kind of humiliating cost, and then speak tenderly to the one who caused the pain? He can only do it because he is being animated by something deeper than human emotion. This brings us to a single Hebrew word pulsing underneath this entire book. It is a word that redefines the nature of God, and once you understand it, it changes how you read the rest of Scripture. The word is Hesed. It appears all throughout the Hebrew Bible, but it is one of the most difficult words to bring into the English language. When you read your Bible, you will see it translated in many different ways. Some versions call it steadfast love. Others translate it as mercy, loving kindness, or unfailing loyalty. The English translations are not wrong, but no single English word is large enough to hold the full weight of the original concept. Hesed is not just an emotion. It is not a fleeting romantic feeling. The word begins with the idea of a covenant. It is a fierce, stubborn, relentless commitment to a relationship. It is a love that refuses to let go, even when the other person has entirely broken the vows. In the ancient world, most relationships were transactional. You do your part, and I will do mine. If you break the contract, the relationship is over. This is exactly how Israel viewed the gods of the Canaanites. If you wanted rain from Baal, you offered a sacrifice. If you stopped offering sacrifices, Baal stopped sending rain. It was a cold, economic exchange. Israel assumed the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob operated the exact same way. They assumed that because they had broken the rules of the covenant, God would simply abandon the contract and find another nation. But God is not Baal, and His love is not transactional. Look at what God says to His unfaithful people in Hosea chapter 2, verses 19 and 20. He is speaking to a nation that has abandoned Him, worshipped idols, and sold itself into spiritual slavery. And He says, I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in steadfast love and in mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness. That phrase, steadfast love, is the word Hesed. God is essentially saying, you broke the vows. You ruined the marriage, but I am going to marry you all over again. And this time, the marriage will not be held together by your perfection. It will be held together by my Hesed. This is the profound truth that Hosea had to live out in his own home. When Hosea walked into the slave market to buy back Gomer, he was not driven by human sentimentality. Human sentimentality would have died long before that moment. The pain was too deep. The public humiliation was too severe. What drove Hosea to hand over the silver and the barley was Hesed. He was acting out the very character of God. His life became the physical embodiment of God's unbreakable commitment to an undeserving people. When we understand this, the whole book changes. Hosea is not a story about how to have a successful marriage. It is not a moral fable about the dangers of bad choices. It is a devastatingly beautiful portrait of divine loyalty. It shows us that God's love is not a fragile thing that shatters the moment we fail. It is a heavy, grounded, relentless pursuit. It is a love that will follow us into the darkest valleys and the deepest shame, just to bring us home. But as powerful as Hosea's actions were, he was only a shadow. Hosea was a prophet, living out a local, historical parable for the nation of Israel. Once you see the depth of this relentless love, you realize Hosea's story was pointing beyond himself the entire time. Because a day was coming when God would not just send a prophet to buy back a bride. God Himself was going to step into a much larger marketplace to pay a much higher price. Hosea's life was a living prophecy. He was acting out a local, historical drama for the 8th century nation of Israel. But the tragedy of Gomer was just a small shadow of a much larger, universal human reality. Because In a profound spiritual sense, the biblical narrative suggests that we are all Gomer. We have all looked for life, security, and love outside of the God who made us. We have all given our devotion to things that promised freedom, only to find that they delivered a quiet, crushing slavery. Hundreds of years after Hosea bought his wife out of the market, the ultimate fulfillment of this relentless love walked onto the stage of human history. Jesus of Nazareth did not just preach sermons about God's loyal love. He was the Hesed of God wrapped in human flesh. He stepped directly into the marketplace of a broken world. Remember the price Hosea paid: 15 shekels of silver and a measure of barley, the scrapings of a prophet's pocket. It was a desperate, humiliating transaction to buy back someone who already belonged to him. But when Jesus comes to buy back an unfaithful people, the price is not measured in silver or grain. The Apostle Peter, reflecting on the cross, writes that we were ransomed from our futile ways, not with perishable things like silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ. The cross is the ultimate fulfillment of the auction block. It is the moment where the true bridegroom takes the shame, the debt, and the destitution of his bride and pays for it with his own life. Jesus absorbs the betrayal. He takes the spiritual unfaithfulness of humanity upon himself, enduring the absolute cost of redemption so his people do not have to. And just as God promised through Hosea to take his bride into the wilderness and turn the valley of trouble into a door of hope, Jesus does the exact same thing on a cosmic scale. He takes the ultimate symbol of human trouble and disaster, a Roman cross, a place of execution and profound curse, and turns it into the door of eternal hope. The grave itself becomes the threshold of a new creation. But the most beautiful part of this redemption is what happens to the broken vows. Remember the 3 children from the beginning of Hosea's story? The names that acted as a ticking clock for a ruined marriage? God scatters. No mercy, not my people. The Apostle Peter, writing to the early church in the 1st century, reaches back and takes those exact names from the Book of Hosea. But he shows how the work of Jesus has completely reversed them. Speaking to ordinary men and women who had been brought into the family of God, Peter writes, "Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy." The devastating curse of the prophetic names has been undone. The covenant is not just repaired. It is made entirely new, sealed not by our ability to keep the rules, but by the perfect faithfulness of Christ. This is why we cannot read Hosea as just a strange, ancient story about a troubled marriage. It is the gospel hidden in the prophets. It is the quiet architecture of redemption. It reveals a God who does not stand far off on a balcony, demanding that we clean ourselves up before we can return home. It reveals a God who comes down into the dirt, into the slave markets of our own making, and pays everything he has to win us back. If this study has helped you see Scripture with fresh eyes, subscribe so you do not miss the next discovery. The shocking command to marry a betrayer was never just a strange historical footnote. It was the shape of God's heart on the page. It was the story of a love that simply refuses to let go.